and we just started hanging around the troubadour. You know, the troubadour is really responsible for the entire music scene.
The queen of rock from the 70s and the woman who helped launch the Eagles needs no introduction. We are talking about Linda Ronstadt, who has the voice of an angel and the heart of a queen. But even with all that grace and power, there are 7 musicians she still hates to this day. So what did these musicians do to make the ever-loving Linda hate them? Let's find out. Number 7. The first name is going to shock you, as it's Neil Young. Now, you would think Linda Ronstadt and Neil Young would have been besties. They were in the same era, had the same vibe, in the same folk rock scene. To be fair, Neil has actually called himself one of her biggest fans. He and Linda Ronstadt worked together for years. She sang backup for him on Heart of Gold. He brought her on tour. She even covered his songbirds. They were part of the same California music wave. On paper, it all looked perfect. But in reality, Linda ended up hating Neil. It started with the 1973 tour. Neil was already a star, but Linda was still rising. So, he would always open in big venues and in front of big crowds. She later admitted she wasn't ready for it. She was used to smaller, quieter spaces. Then came the moment that changed everything. A benefit concert in 1976. It was supposed to be about supporting farm workers. Something both Linda and Neil cared deeply about. But during rehearsals, Neil reportedly shut down her set suggestions. He criticized her sound, blocked songs, and said she was too commercial. After the show, he went even further and told the press that she wasn't built for protest. Basically, she wasn't real enough. Linda left in tears because of who the comment came from. She respected Neil, looked up to him, and in one night, he turned from a mentor into someone who made her feel small. She never shared a stage with him again. Later, she warned her friend, Nicolette Larson, to steer clear of him, too, saying that he didn't live in the real world. That was how she drew the line. Linda never said she hated his music. In fact, she called him brilliant. When you are Linda Ronstadt, an artist with real power and real pain, you don't forget who made you question your voice. Next on the list, we have the drummer who forgot where he came from. Number 6, Don Henley. Before the world knew him as one half of the Eagles' golden duo, Don Henley was just Linda's drummer. Back in the early 70s, he was the guy behind the kit, playing backup while she was headlining sold-out theaters. She gave him one of his first real shots, brought him in, and let him shine. But once the Eagles took off, so did his humility. Linda watched him go from a quiet, talented player to someone who strutted around Sunset Boulevard like he owned it. The band that used to open for her now acted like royalty, and Henley was leading the charge. The real crack in their friendship came. Backstage in 1975, Henley made a snide remark about Linda's music. He mocked her for not writing her own songs, and said she should stick to covers and let the real songwriters talk. It was straight up disrespectful, especially from someone whose first break came from her stage. Linda didn't take it lightly. She revoked his tour credentials right there. Word traveled fast. In the music scene, Don's ego was no secret. There were rumors that he threw tantrums, made bad decisions, and exhibited worse behavior behind closed doors. Some said he was spiraling under the pressure of fame, but for Linda, the worst part was the ingratitude. She had helped build his career, and instead of respect, he gave her attitude. She later called him a climber, said he lost himself chasing stardom. The two never really patched things up. They moved in different circles, had different careers, and Linda never looked back. She went on to win Grammys and cross genres. Stayed in the rock lane. And if you think that was dramatic, wait until you hear about what happened with the next musician. Number 5, this is David Crosby, whose ego ruined his friendships with Linda Ronstadt. Back in the Laurel Canyon days, Linda and Crosby were great friends. Their harmonies were different, but their energy was unmatched. But something shocking happened by the late 70s. It started in the studio. They were working on a collaboration, and Linda, who knows her voice better than anyone, asked for a simple key change. But Crosby shot her down. He flat out told her to learn to adapt. That didn't sit right. What could have been a normal studio disagreement turned into a full-blown feud. The gossip spread fast, but Crosby didn't help himself. He went public in Rolling Stone and called Linda manufactured and claimed She was more product than artist. Linda didn't clap back in interviews. That wasn't her style. But she made sure to cut Crosby off from his life. Bandmates were told not to bring him up. Even his music was scrubbed from the tour playlists. Around Linda, David Crosby was erased. In private, she called him a warning. Proof that even the most talented people can be eaten alive by fame, drugs, and ego. And just wait till you hear who's next. Because the next name on her list did something awful not backstage, but live, with a mic in hand and a drink in the other. Number 4, we are talking about Jim Morrison. It was the summer of 1968. Linda was still clawing her way up through the male-dominated rock scene, trying to stay focused on the music. She was young, still with the Stone Ponies, touring, recording, and surrounded by legends. Then came the Doors and Jim. They were sharing the same circuits and the same stages. At first, Linda thought the Doors were great. They were raw, strange, and exciting. She even said she knew they would become a big band after seeing them at the Whiskey A Go-Go. But there was one thing she never liked. Not then, not ever. Jim Morrison. He was soft-spoken when sober, almost sweet. But once he got drunk, he would go wild and become completely unpredictable. She had never seen anything like it. And one night, at a private after-party near the Whiskey, he crossed the line. Morrison was already drunk with his shirt half open. He was slurring and strutting. Mid-conversation and mid-crowd, he spotted Linda, and without any warning, he dragged her on stage. When they were up there, he leaned in right there, in front of everyone. He tried to kiss her. Linda jerked away instinctively, and he stumbled right into her mic stand. The whole setup nearly collapsed. At that time, nobody quite knew how to react. No one even stopped him. As expected, Morrison didn't apologize, so it got quite awkward. Worse, months later, he mocked her on live radio. He called her sweet but spineless, and said that she was harmless. So, in a way, he humiliated Linda. She never went public with it, of course. That wasn't her style. But in private meetings, she has called Morrison a brilliant wreck who poisoned everything around him. She said he was a walking warning sign. He's the kind of man who lit a fire, stood in the middle of it, and dared the world to pull him out to her. Morrison was a drunk rock star and was the poster boy for everything wrong with the scene. She later said the Doors might have been better without him. And she meant it. But if Morrison was wild and reckless, the next person on her list was worse. Let's keep going. Number 3, Paul Simon, and Linda Ronstadt, 1982. At the time, Paul Simon was at the height of his post-Simon and Garfunkel fame. He was a sharp songwriter, a critical darling, and the guy everyone called when they wanted lyrical genius. Linda Ronstadt was coming off a string of hits that had made her famous worldwide. She had already proven she could master any genre: rock, country, Mexican folk, and opera. So when word got out that she and Simon were going to record a duet, the industry went wild. It sounded like a musical match made in heaven. But in reality, it was a mess. From the first rehearsal, Paul Simon's energy felt cold and controlling. He would nitpick her phrasing and stop her takes to give corrections or more like lectures. He rewrote lyrics without asking. He offered vocal notes that felt less like condescension, according to people who were there. Linda later said the whole thing felt like being scolded by a school principal. And here Linda was not some new artist looking for help. This was the Linda Ronstadt. By 1982, she had already released multiple platinum albums, sold out stadiums, won Grammys, and earned her spot in music history. But Paul didn't see her as a partner. He saw her as someone to manage. As a result, they never developed any chemistry. There was no spark, no connection. There was just this awkward tension and constant second-guessing. The song they were working on eventually got shelved like it never happened. But Linda didn't forget, because for her, this was a cold dismissal. She felt devalued, belittled, and unwelcome in the room. That kind of treatment cuts deep, especially for a woman who had fought her entire career to be taken seriously in rooms full of men who thought they knew better. She never bad-mouthed him in the press. That wasn't her way. But privately, she made a quiet promise that she would never step into a studio with Paul Simon again, and she never did. That moment became part of a larger truth about Linda Ronstadt's career. How often she was treated like a voice instead of an artist. People praised her range, her tone, her emotion, but too many men in the industry refused to treat her as an equal. They just wanted to control her. And Paul, in that studio, made it clear who he thought was in charge. It's ironic, too, because both of them came up during the same era. Late 60s, early 70s, they were both part of the California scene. Both collaborated with the best, but their approaches were wildly different. Paul Simon was a perfectionist, obsessed with structure and lyrical tightness. Linda was a storyteller, always chasing raw feeling and vocal truth. After the failed collaboration, she shifted further into the genres she loved most, like standards, opera, and mariachi. She worked with artists who valued her instincts and left space for her voice to breathe. And while Paul Simon went on to make Graceland and claim more acclaim, Linda carved out a career that was just as powerful, but on her terms. Looking back, that session with Paul was just one of many moments where Linda learned a hard truth that not everyone in the industry knew how to share a stage. Number 2, Frank Zappa for this next name. We are going back to 1974. Frank Zappa and Linda Ronstadt were two names from totally different ends of the musical universe. He was the mad scientist of rock. He was experimental and unpredictable. She was a strong vocalist, tearing through genres. A meeting between the two sounded wild, brilliant even. But when it really happened, it was one of the worst moments of her life. Linda had shown real interest in recording one of Zappa's tracks. Not just out of curiosity, but because she actually respected what he was doing. She liked pushing boundaries too. She wasn't afraid of weird. But from the moment she walked into his studio, she could feel that it was a setup. We just wanted her to do what he said. Every time Linda offered a creative suggestion, like changing a harmony, adjusting a phrasing, he would shut it down with a smirk. He said her voice was too clean and her delivery was too commercial. He accused her of turning raw, honest music into something you would hear in a car commercial. And then came the moment that made her hate him. They were in a live rehearsal, and midway through the session, Zappa stopped the entire room. Everything went silent. He turned, looked directly at Linda, and said that this was what happened when you handed real music to a pop singer. That one sentence shattered her heart. He insulted her voice, her career, and her integrity. And he did it in front of a full room of musicians. Linda didn't argue, of course. She didn't raise her voice. She packed her things, walked out of the studio, and never went back. The collaboration was dead. She stayed silent in public, as she always did with the people who hurt her. But she did say she would never again trust his character. And honestly, she wasn't alone in that. Zappa was known for being difficult. He clashed with musicians constantly, famously called pop music chewing gum for the ears. He openly mocked commercial music. His contempt for mainstream artists was no secret. But that didn't give him the right to humiliate someone who showed up with good faith and real talent. Linda had sung rock, folk, opera, and even mariachi. She could go toe-to-toe with the best musicians in any genre. But Zappa didn't see that. He saw someone outside his chaotic little club, and he made her pay for walking in. And for Linda, that was the final straw. She could handle differences. In opinion, she could even work around arrogance. But what she couldn't accept was disrespect, so she was never seen collaborating with him again. And neither with another famous musician. Number 1, Elvis Costello. Back in 1979, Linda Ronstadt was at the top of her game. She had just come off a string of hit records, and she was headlining major festivals across the country. That year, she performed at a big show in Cleveland in front of a big crowd. Everything about her set showed she had fully arrived as one of music's most respected voices. Somewhere in that crowd was Elvis Costello. At the time, he was still new in the industry. He was clever, edgy, and known for not holding back his opinions. People called him punk rock's poet, as he was smart, intense, and always a little angry. He had that kind of energy that made people lean in, but also made people nervous. After Linda's performance, instead of showing support or admiration, Elvis made a comment that would sting for years. He told a group of reporters that her set sounded like background music for brunch. It was a totally dismissive comment, and it caught people off guard. Linda had earned her place in music through hard work and raw talent, and to have someone brush it off like that in public felt more personal than just a critic doing his job. Linda was surprised. She had actually liked Elvis's work. In fact, she had just recorded a cover of his song Allison on her Living in the USA album. She had even gotten permission through her team to do it properly. She thought it was a great song and wanted to help bring attention to it. She wasn't expecting a thank you, but she definitely wasn't expecting to be insulted either. After he made that comment, Linda found him backstage and tried to talk. Maybe she hoped to clear the air or just understand what had happened. But instead of softening, Elvis reportedly threw another insult her way and walked off without saying much more. That was the end of it for her. What hurt the most was the fact that she had supported his music. After Allison, she went on to cover 3 more of his songs: Party Girl, Girls Talk, and Talking in the Dark on her 1980 album Mad Love. This was Linda taking a big step into new wave music, changing her look, trying something fresh. It was a big departure from her usual sound, and it was clear she was taking risks. But once again, Elvis made sure everyone knew he wasn't impressed with her talent. He later called her version of his songs torture and said the whole album was a waste of vinyl. The irony is, Mad Love didn't fail because of Linda's talent. In fact, many people loved it and still see it as one of her most interesting albums. But the backlash, especially from someone like Costello, made it harder to stand by. He even joked later that maybe he was the reason she left rock altogether and went into opera and Mexican folk music. Through it all, Linda kept her cool. When she was asked about the feud years later, she simply said Elvis could keep sending songs if he wanted the royalties. She even admitted she liked singing Party Girl because it gave her a way to push back at the idea that she was just some carefree singer. She sang that song with real emotion and used it to say something deeper. Eventually, Costello came around. Decades later, after seeing Linda's documentary, he admitted he had been immature. He said her voice made him cry, and he called her version of Party Girl a reminder of how unfair he had been in his younger years. Linda never said much in return, and maybe she didn't need to. By then, she had already moved on from the world where someone like Elvis Costello could shake her confidence. Now tell us, who do you think is the rudest musician to ever exist? Write your answer in the comments below, and before you go, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates. Goodbye for now.